In this video, I'm gonna show you how to paint this pumpkin now that Halloween is around the corner. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Ingrid from My Inner Palette and I'm really happy that you're here today. So if you were looking how to paint a pumpkin for this Halloween, this video is for you. So let's review the art supplies that you're gonna be needing for this. You will need 2 containers with water, one for the dirty water and one for clean water. You will also need a place to mix your paints. I usually use a ceramic plate, but you can also use the palettes that come with your watercolors, with some of them. And speaking of which, you also need some watercolors. So in this case, I'm gonna be using the ones that come in pans. Feel free to use any watercolor that you have on hand. This painting has quite a bit of layers, so we're gonna be using a paper that is cold press, 300 grams, acid-free and 100% cotton. You will also need a couple of paint brushes. I have one round brush and a wash brush, but you can use 2 different sizes of round brushes instead. To do a quick sketch of the pumpkin, you're also going to be needing some other materials like an eraser, a pencil, and I also have a kneadable eraser. I'll show you next how we're going to be using it. I will skip the part on how I drew the pumpkin, but feel free to pause and try to copy something similar to what you see on the screen right now. Once you have your sketch ready, we're going to be using the kneadable eraser, which is used to clean the dark lines that you have on your sketch. So whenever you're painting with watercolor, you're going to be able to see the lines of the drawing, but they're going to be much clearer. As you can see now, they're quite dark and sharp. So in that case, once you paint with watercolor on top of it, you're gonna be able to see all these lines, unless you do a little bit of erasing of the lines and just leave them very, very light. Then in that case, once you're painting with watercolors, you're not gonna be able to see any type of pencil lines underneath. Once you paint with watercolor on top of any pencil lines, you're not able to erase them. So this is why we do it before we paint. If you haven't used a kneadable eraser before, you can either go like this with a dabbing type of motion, or you can start rolling it over your sketch. And this is how it looks like after we've used the kneadable eraser. You can see that all the lines are much lighter and easier to work with. Before I start painting, I like to hydrate my watercolors, which is what I'm doing. I'm just putting a little bit of water on top of each one of them. This allows me to have the watercolors ready for whenever I need them. They are gonna be easier to grab from the pan onto my palette. For this pumpkin, I'm gonna be using a variety of colors that they are quite warm colors. So it's in the range of orange, yellow, and red-orange to start with. Because I wanted to create a lighter tone for the orange, I'm mixing it with yellow, as you can see, and adding a little bit more water because the first layers for this painting are meant to be very light, so then we can build up in layers the darkness of it to give more contrast to the painting. I always try the color on a piece of paper just to make sure that I have the right ratio between water and pigment. If I'm happy with it, then that's how I go. And as you can see now, I'm starting to paint the first layer. So it's gonna be quite light, and the idea is that you start painting each one of the sections of the pumpkin with the orange color, and then on the borders, the idea is to add the red orange while the section is still wet. So in this case, we're gonna be working with a wet on wet technique. If you don't know what a wet on wet technique is, or any other basic watercolor techniques, I invite you to have a look at a video that I have with all the basic techniques available, so you can familiarize yourself with the terms. For each one of the sections, I'm pretty much repeating the same and being very careful of leaving a gap in between the sections, because if they joint, what happens is that the watercolors are going to bleed from one section to the other as the sections are wet. So we want to avoid that. But if it happens, oh well, this is how we learn, and you're gonna get a wonderful different type of effect on your watercolor, so don't be too hard on yourself. Once you follow the same technique for a few different sections on your pumpkin, the idea is that you clean your brush, and then with a clear brush you can start blending your colors a little bit while the background is still wet but not super wet. Make sure to follow this for all the sections on your pumpkin. I'm gonna jump a little bit forward to show you the next steps. Once you finish the first layer, you can start preparing some paint for your second layer, and in this case I'm using a combination of neutral tones which are brown. So I'm using like a light brown and a little bit of a darker brown together. And with a clean brush and water, I'm adding a coat of just water on top of the first section of the pumpkin because it's the driest one. And I'm gonna start adding some more yellow mix and adding some of the brown on the bottom, just to create more of a shape of that roundness that each one of the sections of the pumpkin has. And then I'm adding a little bit more of the orange red on the corners of it, around it, and just trying to blend and mix a little bit the colors that I have. When you're adding your colors, just add them sparingly, not like a lot of them all together, and then see how it's working out. If you need to add a little bit more red here or orange, or if it's getting too dark too quickly, beware. Perhaps you can lift off some paint in that case, just to create that shininess on one of the sides, so it starts giving you like a 3D effect of that roundness of the pumpkin sections. I like to work in a way organically with the paint, so this is something that works for me. It might not work for you. As you can see, I have a tiny plate where I'm mixing everything. It gets like a little bit mixed up with one color and the other, and I have different puddles. But for some other people, it might be easier if they have completely separated puddles of color. Before they start painting, I just start creating my colors as I go by observing, I think that here it would benefit of having a little bit more brown, or a little bit more red orange, or whatever it is, right? So I paint quite organically, let's say. If you, on the other hand, are the type of person that would like to have everything kind of like a mise en place, as they say when you're cooking, and have all the elements ready to go to do your painting, then I will recommend you to prepare all your colors in advance, have them separated in a color palette with individual paddles. And as you can see, while I'm painting the second section, I'm considering the shape of the pumpkin to maintain that brightness and the highlight on the other section, so it follows like a circle. And the idea is that you keep on doing the same for the second layer with all the other sections, trying to leave those highlights following this type of circle of the pumpkin as well. And if by accident you have covered the highlights, you can lift some paint, as you can see in the video, by using a clean brush and brushing off the excess of paint onto your paper towel. And remember to follow the same process for each one of the sections, including the ones in the back. For the purpose of this video, I'm gonna skip forward a little bit again. After painting all the sections, I realized that the first one that I've been working on looked a little bit too brown for my liking, and because I like working organically, I'm giving it a little bit of a revamp with some more lighter colors. So for that I'm using a combination with the orange yellow and also the orange red to just get rid of a little bit of that brownish, very strong color that I had. And here I'm being careful not to lose that highlight, so if I'm going too dark, I'm just lifting off some paint to make sure that I still have the highlight. Once we have worked on the base pumpkin, now I'm working to create some shades that they are more brownish, and this is because I'm gonna be working on painting the lines in between the sections. And if the sections haven't been dried completely, it doesn't matter. If it bleeds, then we're gonna try to blend it in as we did before when we were blending the first layer in the pumpkin. When we start blending the colors, the idea is that we use the brush with clean water but not excess of water. So the idea is that the brush is wet but not soaking in water. So that means that we're able to use it to blend the colors rather than adding much water to the painting. And once more, we continue doing the same with each one of the sections. And while the background is still a little bit wet for the pumpkin, I start adding a little bit of mossy green on the bottom of it. If some of the sections dried up, you can still wet them a little bit and then keep on adding that mossy green on the bottom. And then you can blend them up with clean water with your brush, just to make sure that it doesn't make a hard line, so it's still within the section. And we're gonna be repeating something similar in the upper part. So we're gonna be adding a little bit of clean water, and then we are gonna be adding some green to give those highlights. And now that the main pumpkin is mostly finished, we're gonna start working on the leaves. And for that, we're gonna be mixing some of the mossy green that I have with lighter green and adding some water to start with a really light wash. If you think that the wash that you're working with is not light enough, you can always bring a little bit of more water with your brush, as I just did, and that would allow you to lighten it up a little bit more. And at this stage, I'm not worrying about separating the leaves. I'm just painting the whole thing as one. Then I'm gonna start adding more details to try to make the leaves separate from each other. And to give some different shading, you can see that I'm also lifting up paint with my brush just to make it a little bit more interesting instead of just like a plain green color. While the background's still wet, I started adding a little bit more darker green on the edges of the leaves, and then I'm just gonna let it sit there and continue working with the vine. And the idea is that with the slight wash that you complete a full first layer for everything green. So it would be the leaves and the vine with the stalk that comes from the pumpkin. While working on the vines and the stalk, that allows the leaves to dry a little bit, and then I can come back to paint on top of them with the background already a little bit dry. So now I start adding sort of like a second layer on top of that one to try to start making a difference between one leaf and the other, and then just to give a little bit of contrast in depth to the vine itself. And then it's just all about building layer after layer and getting it darker and darker. And then we continue doing the same with the stalk. Although in this case, instead of like blending everything, we're gonna try to add with a really small round brush little details, like little lines emulating hairs and things like that. And we're also gonna be doing this in layers. So once we're done with the green, we're gonna jump and start using a darker green by adding a little bit of brown onto it. And now that the leaves have dried, we're gonna be adding one more layer because it's looking too light for my liking. So we're gonna be adding more color to the edges and then blending that color in with a little bit of water as well. And then we repeat the same on the other leaf. And finally, to finish off the pumpkin, we're gonna be adding some really thin lines separating each one of the sections just to give it that last bit of contrast and depth. And for this, we're using a darker type of brown that is mixed as well with orange, red, and some orange. Make sure you're making these lines in each one of the crevices of the pumpkin, including the ones in the back. And voila, you have a pumpkin. If you've liked this video, remember to hit the like button and also check my channel for other videos that you might be interested if you're starting off your watercolor journey. So I'm gonna leave some links in the box below and make sure that you're checking them out. And have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. See you next time.